So Matt and I wanted to just take a quick moment here to make a little bit of an announcement and let you know some exciting things we're going to be doing here with the Real Review podcast. As you know, with our podcast, we've been doing sort of a style where we have this big chunking pile of all these different segments and different shows and parts of the show. And we realized over the last couple of weeks that we wanted to make kind of a minor change that we think is going to really do some good things for us. And basically what that involves is we're going to be splitting the different segments of the show into their own individual episodes that are kind of standalone. So we have our Tube Talk, we have our Coming Soon, we have our Reviews, which is kind of our tentpole type thing we do every week, and we're going to continue doing every week. And we're going to split those into kind of their own self-contained little shows for people, right?
Yeah.
So what that's going to do and what we're hoping that it will allow us, and we think it's going to be good, is it's going to allow us to connect with you guys, our listeners, throughout the course of the week and make it something that we're not just throwing this one show out on Tuesdays, but over the course of the week, we're releasing little bits of information and stuff. And then additionally, we feel like it's going to be a lot easier for people to digest. You know, there's a lot to these shows, and there's a lot of conversation about some really interesting aspects of films and television shows and directors and writers and producers. And so that way people can get into an individual episode, hear that content, and then if they feel like they want more, go on to the next one and hear something about a film or something about a coming soon piece of news item.
Right. So digestion is key.
Digestion is key. Getting that good, healthy digestion going.
Probiotic.
Probiotic is great. Yeah. And I said this in the beginning. One thing we will be doing every Tuesday and still be coming out every Tuesday is our movie reviews. So we'll be having a movie review segment that is about 30 minutes long. Still comes out every week. That's going to be our main tentpole thing. And then every week you'll see more segments of different things come out, which will be, you know, our Tube Talk and other stuff. So Matt, any final thoughts?
Yeah. So this is an opportunity to really absorb the fact that Tuesday won't only be the best day of the week.
Oh, yeah.
There will be more best days of the week.
Absolutely. It's starting a diet.
Yes.
It's a whole diet they can have throughout the week. So there you go. And thank you guys for staying tuned. And we're really excited about these awesome changes. And actually, yeah, stay tuned. And we're going to be starting up our review segment right after this. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 films: John Wick Chapter 2, the Lego Batman movie, and Rings.
Welcome to the Real Review.
Welcome to The Real Review, sponsored by Parametric and Lazy Ape Studios, where you get some of the latest happenings, real thoughts, and perspectives in the world of film and television. I'm here with Matt. I forgot what to call you. Hey, and I am...
And everybody, this is Joel Wick Cunningham.
Joel Wick Cunningham. That means I'm going to start doing some gun fu, right?
Gun fu.
Yeah, watch your back. So greetings to all of you listeners out there, and for those of you that are joining us for our very first time, then we just wanted to give you a brief synopsis. This show is it's one segment that we do in the Real Review sort of media conglomerate, if you will, which we're doing now. And basically, this is our review section where we do this kind of perspective that meets fan versus critic. So Matt kind of has more of like a... What would you say? Fan perspective?
Fan, emotional, excitable.
Yeah. Very easy. He sees lights and he follows those.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And I'm more of the critic perspective. So you would say that I'm more of the
negative.
The negative. Yeah. I hate things. So that's kind of my side of things. But it's the Rotten Tomato score, if you will. We take all the thoughts and the two sides of the coin, the fan and the critic, and we put those together and we give you our real thoughts and our real perspective on films and television. So greetings to all of you joining us. And Matt, why don't we just get right into reviewing some films?
Yeah.
Awesome. So what do we have coming up first?
First off, let's start with John Wick Chapter 2.
Ooh, it's a very good one.
Yes, John Wick Chapter 2. So after returning to the criminal underworld to repay a debt, John Wick discovers that a large bounty has been put on his life. This is directed by one of the two directors from the first John Wick film, Chad Stahelski. And it also stars, again, Keanu Reeves, Ricardo Scamarcio, Ian McShane, Ruby Rose, Lawrence Fishburne, and Common, just to name a few of the people. But, man, John Wick 2, Joel, I dug this movie a lot.
Nice.
Huge fan of the first John Wick. It really brought into the forefront the gun fu, as you were alluding to earlier.
Yeah.
But it really started this thing where you have really awesome stunt work all in camera happening, and they continued it brilliantly in John Wick Chapter 2.
Yeah.
I actually feel like they upped the action element in the second movie, and it wasn't just for the sake of upping it. It made sense, and it still looked just as great. I actually liked a lot of the action in this second one more so than I liked the first one. And the first one's really good.
First one's
so
great,
that's saying a lot, at least in my eyes. I feel like they really brought it to another level. I felt like they had a ton of really long takes that were great, and it was all in camera. And just to give you that juxtaposition, a couple of episodes ago, I was talking about Resident Evil and the fight scenes and how
you love those so much, right?
It was awful. I had to close my eyes. It was
Getting
terrible.
Nauseous, I think. Is
Yes.
what you said.
So in those Resident Evil fight scenes, it was several different camera angles and cuts and jumps from each of those camera angles just for a few seconds of kicking and punching. It was really hard to tell what was going on. It is the exact opposite, and I think this is what John Wick does is a clear template of what I feel like every action movie should try to achieve.
One would hope.
Yes. And it's the long takes. It's one camera following John Wick as he's like shooting 30 different people in the face, and it doesn't cut away from that take.
Yeah.
And it pulls you into the movie. It pulls you into the experience. It looks incredible.
Yeah.
It gives you this sense of awe and just wonder of like, how did they do this? Like that is a crazy amount of coordination and choreography, and just the work that goes into something like that is really incredible. And it's not just like one scene that does it. It's the whole film. And it's really, really great to watch. And that goes into the next part of Keanu Reeves being just really great. I feel like this is a type of role that is him. He is perfect for this type of role. It's kind of along the same lines of Neo, a lot of action, not as much talking, I hear that sometimes, that if you throw Keanu in a role, like, and, cut back on the dialogue, and if it's just more action than talking, Keanu's perfect, know?
Yeah.
But in this, he does well. Even with the dialogue, it fits him. I think it fits his character. But I really have a tremendous amount of respect. It's him 95% of the time doing the stunts, doing the action, and that just in itself it's exciting to see that, because there's a lot of times in films where you see a stunt double doing something, and it takes you out. You're like, that's not really him.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah.
So one element that we had talked about, and this is something we talked about before we did the podcast, was this new kind of aspect of maybe world building that they kind of included with this film. So what are your thoughts with that element? Yeah.
So my thoughts are, I loved it.
Yeah.
So the Continental Hotel of Secret Assassins, or whatever you want to call them.
I don't know what you would call it.
They don't have a name yet.
Yeah.
Or the Continental, I think we're joking around, or the Continental Country Club.
Yeah, it's the Continental Country Club. Yeah.
For assassins.
Yes.
It's not just a singular like USA conglomerate. It's a worldwide thing, and it's something that they expand the mythology of the assassin League of Assassins, I guess, and they expand it to a worldwide thing, and I loved it. I loved the mythology building. I really, really loved what they did. I thought it fit. Personally, I thought it worked really well, and I loved where they're taking it. I loved how it just builds and it's building, and you see that this is just more so than what we saw in the first movie.
Gotcha. So for me, I think there's a lot of things that are similar in how we feel about it and likes, and I will say to start off, there is a lot of more likes than there are dislikes. I did not like this movie as much as John Wick 1. And I will get into that, but I do want to start by saying I did like it a lot. I thought it was a really good movie, but there was a couple things that kind of kept me from going as liking it as quite as much. And so I'll start with the positives. One of the things that I felt like with this film that was just standout awesome was, and probably the biggest thing, was the action.
Yeah.
They just nail it with all of the action. It's in your face. It feels very visceral, very real. And I think that is complemented so well due to the fact that the cinematography as well feels very real.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
when something is dark on screen, you recognize that would be dark sort of in that environment in real life. When something is bright and well lit and lit brightly, I'm saying that same way twice, you recognize that was probably the way it would be in reality. And so it makes this sense of action feel very visceral and feel very real. And I think that's also partnered with the fact that, one, it didn't feel like they used much of any visual effects for the actual action fighting.
Yeah.
They probably did things to add some elements, but they didn't actually have cinematography. They're like CGI characters like fighting each other with like CGI weapons.
Right.
And also that, Keanu Reeves is the one doing these stunts. He's the one pulling these action elements out. And these are like really intense, some of them. It's some of the best action I've seen all year.
Yeah.
So, and cinematography wise as well, it reminded me a lot of like Skyfall and a lot of the James Bond films that have come out within the last little while with Daniel Craig. They have this real artistic kind of flair and artistic kind of style, very real sense of it, and it adds to that world, and it makes you feel like, hey, this could be an environment, that could be a real thing that kind of happens. And the other positive I'll talk about is I think Keanu Reeves did as well a very good job.
Yeah.
I think Keanu Reeves tend to do a very good job in roles, and you mentioned this for me, that he doesn't have a lot of dialogue. He is a great character to connect with and empathize with. Whether you're going to The Matrix or you're going all the way back to Bill and Ted's, there's this like humanness to him and this connectability that you can kind of get into who he is as a person and connect with him as a person just when you see him on screen, just by his presence there. And I think this role fit him super well because of that. And him being forced to go through these different things because of these bad situations that he kind of keeps falling into when he's just trying to live his life,
Right.
So I thought he did well with that as well. So the bad stuff. First and foremost, you mentioned this, the Continental Country Club. The continental aspect I really did not enjoy very much. And I think the main reason I didn't like it as much is it served a specific purpose in the film to kind of set up a lot of the reasons for why he got back into this world and this environment.
Right.
But it came across at a certain point as being very disconnected from reality.
Ah.
And to me, that the film cries out to be about reality. I mean, the first scene, it just jumps right in from sort of maybe a month after the events, or after Keanu Reeves has had a chance to heal from the events of the first film. It jumps right in, and it's just like boom, 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 action and action. And then they start getting to this almost kind of like silly environment where there's these sense of rules. And I always pictured John Wick as like this kind of lone gunman type guy. And they even talk about that, like how he kind of stands alone as his own type of assassin and everything like that. But then they start putting these like, they've got their guy that they go to that does all their weapons, and they've got their tailor that they go to, and they've got this hotel with this own currency. And I would have been fine with like a taste of that if they had given me like, here's kind of like a couple little elements of that maybe, John Wick stands on the outside of that. Maybe he never really wanted to be a part of that, but kind of did it begrudgingly, and they talked about that a little bit, but it really felt like he was just kind of like, he just had joined this group of people that all went through assassin school together. And that works itself out very badly at times, because then it becomes this almost like game where there's like, I don't want to spoil anything, but you get close to the end of the film, and I start asking myself the question, how many assassins are there?
Right.
It's like everybody in the world is an assassin. And it's like there's a scene at the very end, which he said is in the previews, where one of the guys is basically like, he just says something, and then all these people like in the entire park just freeze.
Yeah.
Because somehow they're all connected to this Continental Country Club.
Right.
And I'm like, it just felt very unrealistic in that sense, because I just don't think that many assassins could exist and have that sense of rules. And but I mean, the Lucy Lawless playing the violin, she turns out to be an assassin, and some but overall I still really liked it. I still really enjoyed it. I think that was the biggest element that worked against it for me. And there was some tonal issues at times. I mean, especially at the beginning, where they were kind of going with this like, well, we're going to summarize the plot of the first film, and kind of felt a little humorous. I felt like, again, the tone issues were, in the first film, everything that happens really is just a byproduct of that initial spark, that initial thing that happens. Whereas this film, there's like a couple things that are kind of going on.
Yeah.
And are kind of happening with, Lawrence Fishburne's character and all this kind of other stuff that's happening. And it felt kind of forced. And I think one of the things that I noticed, and I mentioned this to you, is I saw that they're actually looking to make a television show. And it just...
So weird.
Yeah, it's just... as soon as I saw that, it just screamed out to me, okay, yeah, so they're trying to set up this other universe, this assassin universe where John Wick is going to be like the entry character into that universe. And then who knows what they'll do. Maybe John Wick won't be in the movie or the show. Maybe he'll do it. But it just felt like they were trying to force this idea of growing it and expanding into a universe when it didn't warrant that. I wanted a more straightforward film that was just about he got forced back into this. He has to do it because of that, and then he gets that done and he moves out of it. So
right.
Yeah.
No,
so,
I think just I want them to finish out this trilogy. If they want to do a show after that, then great. But I feel like they need to just let this thing run its course first.
Yeah.
I would say with the negative things I do, I love. So I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I loved all the continental stuff.
Yeah. How do I get my country club invite? I mean, do I have to join a certain school or something?
Yes. You know what? I think you have to be invited by John Wick himself.
There you go.
Yep. And but yeah, no, I really, really loved it, and I'm so excited that there's a third one that's going to be happening.
Yeah.
And this is really shaping up to be quite the series. I'm really excited.
Cool. So, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, if I had to rate this thing between 0 to 100, I would give it a 90.
No, very
90% A-.
It's a bit high. That's not as high actually. I thought you were going to go a little higher. So yeah. So for me, I would give it, I think, a B plus A minus range, probably around an 89.
Okay.
Maybe an 88. It's really just the tonal issues and the somewhat silliness feeling of the assassin world.
The country club
up there. Yeah. So awesome. So let's then move into our next film. What are we going to be talking about next, Matt?
Next is a lovely little film that I did not get the chance to see, but you did, Joel, and this movie is called the Lego Batman movie.
Yeah, so we'll throw it back to me then. So the Lego Batman movie, yes, it's film basically synopsis is Bruce Wayne, or Lego Bruce Wayne, if you will, must not only deal with the criminals of Gotham City, but also the responsibility of raising a boy he adopted. And this film stars the voice work, I guess, if you will, of Will Arnett, Michael Cera, Rosario Dawson, and it's directed by Chris McKay. And so overall, going to this film, interestingly enough, my expectations were good for it, that I thought it would be okay, but they weren't high.
Okay.
And it's funny because, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. I don't know how that saying goes, but, this is the second time now that I've gone into a Lego movie and thought, I don't think that's going to be very good, and was surprised by how good it actually turned out to be. So a positive thing,
That's
positive
awesome.
surprise. But yeah, so the first Lego movie comes out, and you immediately think that it's this kind of silly idea that it's like they're just cashing in on this franchise, this thing that everybody knows. It's like, the Emoji Movie, or Angry Birds. It's this kind of pop cultural thing, that everybody knows, but they want to just use that to make a movie out of it. And so I had really low expectations for it. But then I heard a couple people that had gone and see it that I trust, and read a couple reviews, and they were all saying some really positive things about it. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I went and saw it, and sure enough, turned out to be a very good, very effective film, and was much more deep and humorous than I actually really thought that they would be able to do.
That's awesome.
With the movie like Lego Movie. Yeah, so again, Lego Movie, I'm thinking sequel, and they're using basically what is a secondary character from the original movie, which is usually a bad sign.
Yeah.
When they take like a character that is just kind of like a spoof kind of funny character in a comedy, and then they try to make a second sort of standalone film out of that character, right?
Example, Minions.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah, example, Minions, So my expectations were a little low. I did see the previews, and the previews looked all right. They didn't look amazing. They just they were funny, but they weren't hilarious to me. And I went into the movie, and sure enough, this movie turned out to be really, really flippin' funny. So one of the things that I love so much about it, it was very, and this is a term that some people like and some people don't, or don't really like the concept of, but it's very meta. It was very self-aware, and it reminded me of another movie that had come out basically in last year, which was Deadpool.
Last February, actually.
Yes, exactly. So it's same time. So this is definitely a different movie in tone and different movie in purpose, but the humor was very similar, and they used a lot of almost satirical elements of sort of the comic book type world, which was funny. So there's moments in the script where, Batman is obviously this person that's been adapted into so many different comic books and so many different television shows and all these different types of formats. And so there's definitely times in the movie where they're actually making fun of sort of like his prior history. You know what I mean? They're talking about, oh yeah, remember that one time that Batman got really weird, and they show like a clip from the television show, the actual Batman television show,
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so there was just a lot of humorous type things that happened with the script there. And the cool thing as well is that they didn't skimp on trying to go at least a little deep. And it's a kids movie, so they're not going to go maybe beyond a certain point of depth. You know, the deepest those kinds of movies are like Pixar.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it went as deep as like a Pixar, like Up with the sadness and the death and Finding Nemo and all those things. But it did have some depth. It did have some sadness that was there. And it was dealing with more than just like, let's have flashy, funny, crazy things happening and then kind of briefly talk about all this stuff. Batman is actually in this film struggling. Lego Batman is struggling with something that is similar to his character in a lot of types of iterations of him, which is the loss of his parents. And because of that, you see him struggling with trying to connect with people because he doesn't want to lose them. And it's a really funny dynamic and how that even works out with like him and, his butler, which is voiced by Ralph Fiennes. And it's, so Alfred a lot of times has become in these different iterations this almost like father figure in a way, especially in the Christopher Nolan series.
Right.
And in this one he was as well, but it was more of like the scolding, humorous kind of father. And they did some really funny things with it where, there's like a part where Alfred's like, all right, well, you're locked out of the computer. And Batman's like, but I want to get on the computer, And so, and Will Arnett just nails it with the voice.
So good, yeah.
Yeah, he does a really good job with the voice here. I think he's just perfect with it. But so the setup with a lot of the drama and him and basically, so Michael Cera plays this character who turns out to be sort of Robin, and he's in love with, Batman. He thinks Batman's amazing. And he also thinks that Bruce Wayne is amazing. He's like this, he calls him the most successful orphan, basically, because, of his orphanage. And so he really respects and loves Bruce Wayne. And he ends up getting kind of indirectly adopted by, Bruce Wayne Batman. And so there's this really funny relationship that ends up building that, Michael Cera is kind of like, he will do whatever Batman wants. And so Batman loves him and cares for him, but he doesn't want to show it. And so there's these weird, funny moments where he kind of has him do different things and he's like telling him how to do things. And Michael Cera's like this, Dad, you want this, Dad? Like this, good, Dad. It's really funny how the dynamic works between them. So overall, I was really happy with it. I was really satisfied. And I even liked, they did such clever things with just the animation, like the way that their hair swooshes, like it's not attached to their head.
Lego hair.
Yeah, like Lego hair, and they had a whole ensemble of characters that they pulled in from a completely, like the DC universe. They unlock a bunch of bad guys, and even outside of that. So, velociraptors show up at one point, and Godzilla, and there's the Eye of Sauron, which, there's a really funny part. I don't want to spoil anything for the film, but there's actually a pretty funny part in the film where basically he's the Eye of Sauron, I'm not going to say how, but kind of is there and it's involved, and they accidentally blow it up, and the guy that blows it up, he's just kind of like, nothing to see here, and he just kind of walks off, and it's this awkward kind of moment that you don't see in like it felt very funny, non-polished.
Yeah.
It was like they were going with the thing that they did with the first film, which is to say that like it's a high-level kid that would be making something like this. Like if a kid was actually to do this, then this is kind of how it would go, but it was at a very high level of that. So it didn't feel silly or goofy unless it was purposely trying to be silly. Yeah. So Matt, any thoughts?
No, that's awesome. I'm really excited to see this. I'm actually going to see it this weekend with my boys.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
I'm really excited and encouraged that you liked it a lot too.
Yeah.
And that's because my anticipation level has been up there. And the humor is what has me, especially with all the marketing leading up to it.
Yeah.
Namely, I don't know why it's so funny to me seeing Batman do like these everyday, like normal things. He's like cooking himself something in the trailer. Now, is this in the film where he's actually on the microwave and he puts in like 20 minutes instead of 2 minutes?
Yes, that's even better in there.
It's so good. And then also he's trying to find the right input channel on the
that
big
is on
TV.
there too. Yeah, and again, it's even better in the film.
Just that kind of humor is just so funny to me. And I keep hearing really, really good things. I'm really excited to see it. It's got like a 90-something% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth it. I'd say the one, so, if there's bads, I'd say the one bad to me is the ending. It felt a little forced. It felt a little, I don't want to say cop out, but it's a kid's movie. Yeah. And it felt like, in the first movie, there was a weightiness to the loss and the death that would happen in the film, when people are getting, stuck or frozen.
Yeah.
which kind of like, I don't know how Lego dies, but like that's kind of like symbolic, I guess, of death with the Legos.
Right.
But in this film, there's like literally like hundreds of people getting drowned in lava and like getting turned into fish. Voldemort makes an appearance at one point, and people are getting Avada Kedavra, and there's all these crazy stuff is happening, and so there's no real weight to that like there was in the first film, which I kind of would have been nice to have a little bit more weight to that. And then additionally, the ending just kind of wraps up very nicely. It's like, okay, everybody's happy and we're going on our way. Whereas the first film, there was like a deep moment to it in the actual Lego story, and then that translated into the real world. And I felt like, and people might say this kind of would be like too similar to the first film, but they didn't really do anything to bring it into the real world like they did in the first film.
Right.
Which it didn't necessarily warrant that, but I do think that it would have added maybe a bit more weight to the story, a bit more connectability to the story, because although the first one, maybe some people didn't really like that as much, because it felt a little maybe forced. It definitely connected you, I think, to a bit more to the events, because you realized the weight, that they were metaphorical, that it kind of helped you translate it into your own life a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but otherwise, I thought it was a really good film, and on a scale of 1 to 100, I would probably give this one about a 93, so an A-.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really, really
so,
good to hear.
that is all we're going to say about the Lego Batman movie. Definitely encourage you folks to get out there and check it out. And there was basically 3 movies that came out this week. And one of those films we did not go see, which was what film, Matt?
50 Shades Darker.
50 Shades Darker. So a film that neither of us were really super excited to go see.
And I hear it has a generous 9% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
I think it's well deserving of a 9. I haven't seen the film. I shouldn't judge it overly harshly, but but it's definitely getting, can I say beaten or spanked or I don't know what she's...
It's getting obliterated.
It's getting obliterated. That's a good way of putting it, by the other films that were released this week. So instead, Matt, you went and saw a different film. And
I saw a different movie. I saw the movie Rings, which actually came out the previous weekend.
Yes, February 3rd.
Yes. So I went to see this because I was primarily a fan of the first Ring movie. Mm-hmm. Second one was okay to mediocre. But yeah, I wanted to see this just to see it. And I'm a big fan of horror, the thriller suspense genres, I should say. And so yeah, I was curious. But Rings takes place. It's about a young woman who finds herself on the receiving end of a terrifying curse that threatens to take her life in 7 days, which is basically the same synopsis of the previous 2 films.
But this one's digital, so
this one's this one takes the leap into the digital age. But I think maybe this movie had an uphill battle kind of going towards it because it takes place so long after the first 2 films. I think the first one came out in 2002. Yeah. And it's, and I think they're just trying to make a play for the nostalgia of the name of Rings or The Ring. It's directed by F. Javier Gutierrez and stars Matilda, Anna, Ingrid, Lutz.
Four
names in that one.
Yeah.
There are a couple other people, but honestly, I feel like she's probably the best part about this movie. I could actually see her doing quite a bit in the future. The acting in this movie wasn't terrible, as I was actually kind of anticipating it to be. There are a couple of auxiliary characters that are a little over the top, like horror movie, B-movie actors and actresses. But for the most part, I was like, okay, good. Everybody can hold their own. And I don't know. So like I was saying, I think overall, I felt underwhelmed, a little bit bored and disappointed by this film, even going in with kind of low expectations. And like I said, I feel like it's fighting an uphill battle because it's been so long since that. But the biggest problem for me is that this is a horror film and it's not scary. I did not feel like this movie was scary.
Gotcha.
And I felt like it lacked a tremendous amount of tension, where that's where this movie should excel. I remember seeing the first one and being like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And feeling just tense the whole time, where this does not have that. And so Samara is in the movie. If you don't know Samara, she's the main bad guy that crawls out of the TV. And she only shows up like 3 times, and she shows up. And in those scenes are kind of like, oh, that's kind of creepy, but it lacks attention. And then the crawling stuff is maybe the scariest part of the movie, just her crawling around, and not even the killing part. Yeah. That's not even that scary. I don't know if it's the way that was edited, it was cut, directed, a combination of all three of those things together. The way it was just filmed in general, it wasn't scary, and so that was kind of a letdown. I will say this, however, the one thing that I did really enjoy was there is a story element that's introduced maybe about 10 minutes into it, where this guy, he watches a video. He's a professor. He watches a video, and then he gets a call. 7 days you're gonna die. 7 days later, he's not dead.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, and you're trying to figure this out. And this was really interesting. I was like, I was like, okay, this is interesting. I really want to see where this goes, because I don't know why this guy was able to like totally just bypass this curse or whatever.
Yeah.
And then just as it's getting really interesting and they're starting to explore this, what's happening, what this guy is doing, they totally take it. They just like abandon it and go a different direction. And I was so bummed out by that, because this most interesting part about it, they just totally let it go. And I was like, man, that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. Do you feel like, so with his character, do you feel like they did, so with a concept like this, obviously I'm not so familiar with it. There's a lot of different things to this environment world that I have no knowledge of. But do you feel like with him that they could have basically allowed him to, like the idea that he came up with, that he's surviving, right? I mean, could they have set that up in a way that I think that he could have later on found out that maybe, okay, I'm doing this thing that's supposed to be helping me, but it could have been a twist where it's like, well, he thinks that what he's doing is, gonna work, and then in the end it ends up that he's working for it or something like that. I mean, that's the only way I could see something like that going well.
They could have they could have done that, but in a sense, all of these movies have done that. They always throw in that tack at the end of these movies, at the end of a lot of horror movies where people think they won. Yeah. Usually they'll throw in like tag, saying, "Hey, just kidding, you thought you saved the day, but not." Know.
Yeah, Final Destination.
Yeah, right. Perfect. And this movie felt like Final Destination at times, which is actually not good, because it didn't seem to fit. The cursed Samara like tape thing.
Yeah.
It was just like random, like a light pole falling down on something and end up killing somebody. Like that.
That's really
it's just stuff like that.
Yeah. So there's a question in this, but I would also say that I think one of the things that I'm not a huge fan of horror, like we talked about, but one of the things that does make horror effective and efficient and work as well as it does is when you're able to connect with the characters, and if you look at some of the original horror classic type movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger and everything like that, those were so effective and those movies worked so well because you were still able to connect with the characters, which allows you then to feel their fear and their sense of dread, and also makes you not want to see them die.
Right.
So it brings a sense of loss, it brings a sense of sadness and suspense, because you're wondering, will this person that I'm connected to so strongly die or will they survive? If you're not connected to them, if you don't care about them, then it's just kind of like watching an action take place. There's no emotional shift.
Right. Yep.
So my question that I'm coming from with that is, do you feel like there is a lack of emotion that's connected to the characters and to the story because maybe it's gotten stale? The story is kind of outdated, it's passed over, it's blasé? Or is it more just you think that they really didn't take the story in an interesting enough new direction? Or kind of why would you explain the staleness?
Yeah, so you're definitely not connected to the characters except for maybe the main girl, and that's just because you're with her the whole time.
Yeah.
But with they try and set it up, and you're right. A good film, especially a horror film, you need to feel the weight of somebody dying.
Yeah.
In order for it to be effective.
Yeah.
Or like you said, it's just an action. But in this movie specifically, it's more so that they don't do it well. They don't set it up in a good way.
Yeah.
To where you're like, oh, okay, that's this guy, or this girl is, this is really endearing, this relationship, oh, this is so good. Okay, I really hope nothing happens to these people.
Yeah.
You never had that sense. Like they tried, and I think a lot of films do that as filmmakers as a whole, know that they need to do that with their characters. I think it's just in the execution where most people fail to do that. And the best horror movies are the ones where you're connected with the characters. I should just say in general, the best movies are the ones where you have that connection with the characters.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, good horror movies, I'm not saying that you have to spend like 15 or 20 minutes like developing out a character or getting a sense of who they are, but I've seen effective horror movies do this where even when they're introduced to be a character that's suffering, you still get a sense of them through that suffering. You still get a sense maybe they're searching for something, or they're crying out for something, or they're reaching for something, or you get a little snippet of something from who they are that allows you to connect with them even in the midst of them going through this horrific ordeal, which makes you go, oh, that's not cool. Yeah. That's sad.
So, yeah, I think, obviously it was lacking in that. And ultimately, if I had to rate this thing, and if I had to rate it between 0 and 100, I'd give it a 60, a D-.
Gotcha.
I didn't hate it. There was enough stuff there to keep me intrigued and engaged for a little while. The acting was above par, I guess.
Yeah.
Vincent D'Onofrio was in it too. I didn't mention him earlier, but he was good. But for the most part, I don't think it deserves enough, so that's why I want to give it a 60. But yeah, D-. That's what I got for Rings.
Cool. Well, better luck with the Rings 2 when that comes out. the Rings Chapter 2.
The Ringser,
yeah. So we would love to, we're going to sign off. This is the end of things here, but we would love to definitely hear any opinions or thoughts that you might have from either of our perspectives here. You can email us at realreviewmedia@gmail.com. It's an easy way to get in touch. If maybe you want to see if you felt the same way. Tell us that you felt the same way that Matt did. You thought it was kind of a bad movie. Maybe you really liked it and you have a different opinion.
Right.
Yeah. And then additionally, you can connect with us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/realreviewmedia, or our website, which is realreviewmedia.com. And there we have our newsletter where you can get signed up and get some contact info that's being sent directly to you whenever we post new things. We're going to be having new shows coming out all week now in going forward. And so we would definitely love to connect with you on Facebook and on our website and by email. So awesome. Matt, anything here at the end?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, then, it's been real.
It's been real.